I taught 2 weeks ago in the break a class in Brazil electronically. And I asked the students, and they are executives, a couple of Ph.D. students, a couple of AI master students. Basically, I did it with Ivy and was AI-ish course. And I asked them, what are the unintended consequences of the virus crisis or the virus crisis? And the word unintended consequences is not very applicable. It's an economics term because unintended consequences when you create a rule to resolve a problem like Sarbanes-Oxley, and then other things happen that you didn't expect. But the crisis is certainly taking, is influencing what our lives is going to be. And I want to tell you what they came up with and see if you have anything to add. Actually, these were 2 weeks ago. I changed my mind a little bit. First thing is virtual education. You see, we are having this class. It's going on. Okay, I would love to see you guys and have a real, in class, I would call on you and see everyone's eyes and see if anyone is playing with their computer or with a cell phone. Here I don't have that, but eventually there'll be tools that will help to do that, and I already know there are. But I think, I've been predicting for now 10 years that in local person-to-person education is going to give way substantially, well, not fully, of course, to virtual education. And I think I talked in the faculty retreat last year, and I said that a large number of universities are going to go bankrupt. And actually, in the last 2 years, around 200 entities of education went out of business. And there have been a kind of a turn towards commercialization of education. Now, I think with the coronavirus situation, people are going to become much more comfortable with virtual education, and they will understand that taking a class from Rutgers in New Jersey is pretty much the same thing as taking a class from Stanford in California, or maybe one in France, although there is a time difference. And of course, some of the virtual education is non-synchronous, so you don't have to even be in the same time connected. I actually think that virtual education is going to have a tremendous expansion, and that's a democratizing effect because at the end you can provide, if your audience is large, you can provide education much cheaper. I always say residential education is a luxury. Okay, second thing, I think it has been verified already, substantial increase in remote work. The thing that we didn't think at that time, or maybe we did think at that time, is that some people will stay remote. Organizations will discover they don't need offices. Organization will create new ethics of working from home, time, etc., etc., etc. Certain things not acceptable before will become acceptable. Businesses will pay for your connection, for your computers at home, etc., etc., which they were already starting to pay. Okay. Number three, we have seen now much more than when this was discussed. Many countries taking advantage of data that is public or is not public, that is considered private. In the US, we are now doing these geolocational stuff to basically understand contamination with the virus. Okay, I think Google and Google and Apple are associating themselves, and they are using Bluetooth. So they identify Bluetooth is this kind of short-range communication methodology we have. All of you know it. And basically, Bluetooth can flag another Bluetooth close to you. So you two telephones close to it. And they are developing an app that you opt in. And of course, some countries might not allow opt-in, may force you to opt in. And therefore, if you are close to a person that was contaminated before, there'd be a flag that you could have been contaminated. That's just one example of the many exogenous variables that you can capture, some of them very invasive of privacy. Now, some more personal things. People are getting more used to remote shopping and the costs of remote shopping. But the other side of the coin is the many organizations that didn't emphasize business remotely are now kind of saying that's the only way you can do business, and they are learning how to do it and how to do it maybe cheaper. Okay, a business trading kind of story that they mentioned is that trading algorithms, which are maybe 80–85% of all stock trading, basically don't work very well in the nonlinear part of the continuum. And so rapidly, the mathematicians that work on Goldman Sachs and etc. are thinking about how do we deal with trading in this environment. A lot of remote socializing is happening. People are lonely. People don't have to stay restricted to one room. People sometimes are quarantined in their rooms. And so they meet with their friends, they meet with their girlfriend, they meet with their dog remotely. Anyway, anything what they are doing. A couple of things I thought was kind of cool that the people in Brazil said, the students in Brazil said, I'm doing a lot of housekeeping now that I never did. These are ladies that are in the workforce, and in Brazil you get maids, and so they say, well, now I don't have a maid, I have to do housekeeping. Which I thought was funny. The other thing is all kinds of new issues are coming up, so there'll be substantial increase in there'll be legislation dealing with work from home, protecting people that work at home, etc. Difficult to exactly think what's going to happen on that. They actually predicted an increase in birth rate. I think we knew things the opposite. And then the last one is substantial increase of knowledge of how to work virtually and how to live with virtual components. So I'm stopping here. I just want to see if one of you have any other effects that you think are going to happen.
Professor, I have a concern about this virtual learning trend. Is that I kept thinking that if all the schools are taking remote teaching, then what is the privilege for universities and colleges compared to all the online free resources? Like you can just learn machine learning from Coursera, from DataCamp. So for those that they have difficulty to pay for the tuition, I think at that time, if we all shift our university resources into remote learning, then what's the privilege for universities rather than those?
I think these are very, very insightful comments, and they are very in parallel to what I said. I think Prentice Howard now or Macro Hill, the publishers, have an advantage on preparing educational materials because they can allocate their cost over 100 universities, not over one. I think that certain basic generic education, you can just work out of a textbook, and you can get Tom Cruise to teach it. You know, get someone very charismatic as the best. First, get Professor Alex to develop the materials and Tom Cruise to teach it. Or, you know, Professor Sanella is very charismatic. Have him do the teaching. Okay. So, and I think the question is, what's the role of the university? Has to be raised. I think you're totally right raising it. So, and I think what's going to happen. Go ahead.
Can I add something?
Doesn't cost anything.
I think that basic kind of subjects, let's just say that intermediate accounting, these kind of stuff that can be learned, what you mentioned that can be learned from textbooks, those can be actually substituted by these kind of textbook providers or Coursera online providers. But let's just say that more kind of like creative stuff. Let's just say that when we talk about like continuous auditing, these kind of stuff cannot be actually discussed in textbook. There should be experience, and there should be some kind of deep thoughts about these stuffs. I think that the university rule will change to actually teach about these sophisticated stuffs instead of those things that can be learned simply by just other materials.
Yeah, I agree with that thought, and I always say the basic, repeatable. You know, a professor teaches in one of the state colleges. They teach 4 courses a semester. When you take a job, if you take a job here in the U.S., you're going to ask your department chairman, I want to teach introductory accounting, and I would like to put all my courses in one semester so I can do research on the other semester. That's just repetitive, not a lot of attention to the student, except the stuff. Now, research type of things or advanced courses like this one really are very difficult to package, except for one thing that I would like to bring up, Mr. Gu, is there is a role for group sourcing. I'm not being very successful on getting you guys to speak up. You did, but etc. But if everyone gives an opinion, then you have a lot of permeation or expansion of ideas. But you can't do that with a course with 100 students. So you're right. I think there'll be a category of knowledge. Let me just say one more thing. I think there'll be another category of knowledge that are going to be benefited in a different way. I think if it's a narrow domain knowledge, it's a knowledge that not too many people are interested. But you can find one in the Sorbonne, one in England, one in here. That thing, so you find the people of the same interests. Those things are going to benefit tremendously on a kind of different way of education. Okay, that was education. Any other points?
Only education. Oh, sorry. Let's just say about conferences. It's much easier to actually access to other conferences these days. Just they're opening up. They are actually making people to join from any other places. So let's just say that for AAA, so if you want to join the AAA conference, you have to register and you have to come to the United States to join the meeting. But now let's just say that if they are actually providing these kind of conferences on like WebEx, then anyone can actually join there, and it's gonna be more expensive discussion. I also saw the cybersecurity conference from New Jersey State, New Jersey. Actually, there was like more than like thousands of people actually joining that conference because they just can't access it. yeah, it's much easier to actually have this kind of discussion with other people.
Yeah, I think that's a good, very good point. Conferences, meaning I have been last 2 years traveling 1/3 of my time, talking in conference, very often repeating a particular lecture that I gave with different angle and etc. And virtual conferences are going to change a different tenor, but conferences, more even than diffusion of knowledge, serve to meet friends and to make relationships. And that will be more difficult, correct, Arian?
Now it's like more. I think like there is some like other side. So now I can make more friend because it's virtual. I don't need to actually go to somewhere to meet people, but I can just chat with them during the meeting. And they say that why don't I just like email you so I can just like have a conversation with them. But on the other side, make meeting in person is really also important. So there could be different kind of consequences, I guess. So I think that it can be hybrid. So people who can actually come to that conference, yeah, they will have more benefit. But let's just say that people in India, it's really hard to come to the United States, but if they can actually have this kind of like a virtual conference with lower cost to join the meeting, then it's gonna like make it more expensive discussion, I guess.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I think just the nature of conferences are going to change a little bit. Um, with this course and this course, when before my sabbatical, I made it open, and some people in other countries have listened or are listening, um, and it's a little bit different. Actually, Arian, you gave me an idea. I think we should invent a course, like 3-credit course at Rutgers, which entails attending virtual conference. And you would go to Professor Alex or to me and say, I want to attend the cybersecurity conference. And today, when I was talking about the system dynamics society, and I don't know if that conference is free or not, but I know it is. It's not free. You pay according to your means. To register, and you declare your income. If your income is up to $30,000, registration is $30. If your income is higher than I don't know what, the top registration is 140. It's a different model, correct? Interesting model. And maybe I should give Wenwu 3 credits for attending that conference. So many hours, maybe give a little exam to Wenwu or ask the instructors on that conference to give an exam or something like that. It's an Arian is a different form of learning. It just occurred to me. Interesting thing. Meaning the whole reason why we create our digital library is we 10 years ago saw that this is going to be a means of learning. Now, how far this is going to go is strange. I need to stop here because I want to cover some other papers. But can I ask every one of you to think the following? Put it on a paper. You don't need to send it to me. Maybe we'll discuss it next time. Can you think about how is your life going to change um, in consequence of this? I actually, in the last month, changed my thinking a lot about the consequences. I think the consequences, before I just thought, well, we spend a month um, insulated and go back to the old behavior. And now I hear the conferences being rescheduled and businesses going down. I start thinking maybe the consequences, there is going to be some larger, not going back to the normal. Just one more comment. I have been saying for a little while that the economy was over pumped up. President Trump, desiring to have a good economy when he comes up for election, have decreased interest rates, increased substantial support to business, eliminated business taxes, did all kinds of things to pump up the economy. But the economy is like a balloon. has been ballooned. I have been saying one of these days something is going to happen and we'll have another 2008, or maybe not as deep, but something like that. What I didn't expect at all, that this would be a pandemic. Not, I thought maybe Italy is going to go bankrupt or some industry is going to take a big hit, or et cetera, et cetera. So that has been kind of my thought of this. So I want all of you to think, what is going to be the longer term effect on your behavior, your choices in your personal life of something like this? Okay, let's stop here and start with Qian Yu talking about fair value measurement.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah.
I can hear you and okay? I can see your slides.
Okay, then let's start. So today we're going to talk about the fair value measurement in audit fee evidence from the banking industry. So this paper is motivated by the claims that fair valued assets are usually difficult to audit, and studies of audit fees routinely exclude financial companies. There is little existing evidence regarding the effect of industrial specialization and bank audit fees, and none on the interaction between auditor industry expertise and fair valued assets as it affects audit fees. So this paper explores first, whether audit fees are positively associated with the portions of bank assets that are fair valued. Second, whether this relation is more evident for the least verifiable fair value assets. Third, whether auditors who are bank industry specialists charge more or less than other auditors to audit banks, and in particular to audit fair valued bank assets. The authors use publicly traded bank holding companies data from 2008 through 2011 and document that yes to the first and second question, and for the third research question, they found that whereas bank specialists auditors defined as in ban et al. Charge lower total fee to bank clients on average compared to non-specialists. They charge more for auditing less verifiable fair value assets. And we have to learn that the three levels of inputs used in fair value measurement to better understand this paper. So for level 1 is the least subjective and most preferred, while the level 3 is the most subjective and least preferred. Asset values obtained using level 3 inputs incorporate little or no market-based information such as observed trading prices for similar or identical assets. Instead, level 3 inputs typically consist of models incorporating projected cash flows discounted as assumed rate. So now let's look at the first hypothesis. Bratton et al. Argue that fair valued data are more difficult to audit than many other types of data. First, they argue that generation of fair values involve considerable measurement uncertainty. Managers must not only provide assumptions or estimates, they must also choose among estimation approaches, and these difficulties are less substantial with fair valued assets based on level 1 inputs, and are most pronounced for fair value obtained using level 3 inputs. The second is that auditing fair values arguably poses greater task difficulty relative to many other types of assets. Third is fair value lack objective verifiability, so that auditing fair value data is less structured than many audit tasks. So therefore, auditors respond to greater difficulty in auditing fair values by devoting greater resources, such as time, efforts, to audits, resulting in higher observed audit fees. So the hypothesis one is all else being equal, the proportions of banks' total assets that are fair values are positively associated with banks' audit fees. So the difficulties in auditing fair values increase when fair values are based on level 3 inputs. This is due to the subjective nature of valuation models used for level 3 fair value, as we have discussed. The PCAOB also states that inputs based on companies' own data may be more susceptible to preparer bias because they may not be based on observable market inputs. So auditors should be aware of the increased risk of management bias and address the related risk of material misstatement. So we can...
One second, Sharon. 1 second. Does everyone know what level 1, level 2, level 3 is?
I think Chen already mentioned in her previous slide. Yeah.
She talked about 1 and 3. She didn't talk about 2.
It should be somewhere in between, right?
Yeah.
Between 1 and 3.
I think you could understand it in this way. So moving from 1 to 3 is that from the list of subjective to the most subjective. I think this is most important, the key point you have to notice to understand this paper.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know any examples you could give of level 1 and level 3?
I can't see. I guess I have checked it when I read the paper, but I couldn't remember what is exactly. Yeah.
Maybe I can comment on this. So I heard I once read that one example of the level 1 are the assets that you can look up the market value, versus level 3 there's no market for that, and the prices can be very volatile. So one example of the level 1 can be let's say like assets traded on the market.
Stock. Value of a stock traded in the market.
Yeah, but level 3 can be, let's say, goodwill. There is no market for that, and it's all subjective judgments.
Or stocks that are not publicly traded, that it did private placement.
Yeah.
Like a company buys a piece of a startup in the size to pay $20 million. Okay. So that 1 year later, they want to value that asset. The only way they can really do it is historical cost, unless the startup had another issuance of stock, and there was a valuation of per share value of that thing. And level 2 is something like thinly traded commodities or thinly traded stocks, whereby the stock trades but doesn't trade very much. Casuistic. I just thought it was important to clarify here. Go ahead, Chan.
Oh, okay. So the second hypothesis is that all else equal, the positive association between the audit fee and the proportion of of banks as total assets that are fair valued is strongest for assets fair valued using level 3 inputs. Examining the effect of the bank specialist auditors on audit fees, we consider two competing scenarios. The first is product differentiation scenario, in which industry specialist auditors receive enhanced audit fees compared to non-specialist auditors. And the second is the shared efficiency scenario in which they charge reduced fees. So so both scenarios enjoy some empirical support, but I didn't list here. So given the contradictory pricing scenarios, we state our hypothesis in a noun form. That is, all else being equal, there is no association between banks' audit fees and auditors' banks' industry expertise. In addition, we also explore the bank industry specialist auditors, whether this specialist auditors charge more or less for auditing fair value assets. Again, given the contradictory pricing scenarios, we state the hypothesis in the noun form, which is all else being equal. So association between the auditing fee and proportion of that are fair valued is not associated with the banks, with auditors' bank industry expertise. So this data, the table 1 represents details of sample selection. The data covers years from 2008 through 2011, and the selection procedures leaves us with 1,022 firm year observations with 299 unique firms for our level test. This paper employs the banking industry audit fee model employed by Fields et al. As a baseline model for analysis. The dependent variable is the log audit fees, which is a natural log transformed value of audit fees, and the variables of interest are fair value assets 1, 2, 3, which are defined as a fair value assets amounts measured using level 1, 2, and 3 inputs, respectively deflected by total assets. There are also some control variables as listed. So to test hypothesis 1, we should aggregate the level 1, 2, and 3 to form the variable fair value asset total and test whether the coefficient fair value asset total differs from 0. The hypothesis 2 should test whether the beta 3 differs from beta 1 and beta 2. The second, in order to test hypothesis 3 as well as 4, we employ two widely used industry specialist measures. The first measure is a continuous measure captures the magnitude of client's asset in a specific industry relative to the audit firm's total asset audited. It equals the sums of the square root of the total asset of clients that an auditor has in the banking industry each year, deflated by the sum of square root of the total assets of all clients of the auditor in that.
Yeah, I cannot hear you.
I thought she was quiet. I didn't see her mouth moving. Oh, go ahead. Jan, we can't hear you.
I think she's trying to call in again.
Yeah. She couldn't do communication, so she wasn't on the telephone.
Hello, Eugene.
Okay, she's getting
sorry,
no
yeah, I'm
problem,
sorry because
Shane.
I called to link, so it just
No problem.
yeah. I will continue. So this higher values of the ISPEC1 suggest greater industry expertise. The second one is ISPEC2, which measures both national firm and local office bank industry expertise. It equals 1 if the auditor is a leading firm level auditor in the financial industry, given or if the audit and if the audit office is also the leading audit office in the financial industry in a specific city and a specific fiscal year. So to test hypothesis 3, we did add these two versions of ISPEC to the equation 1 above individually to examine how auditors' expertise affects the total audit fee charged to banks as in equation 2. And based on the product differentiation enhanced scenario, the phi 1 should be positive. To based on shared efficiency scenario implies that phi 1 should be negative. To investigate hypothesis 4, we add the fair valued asset proportion variables and the interaction term of each such variables with ISPEC to explore whether bank industry specialist auditors charge more or less for auditing fair value assets. The coefficients of the interaction terms could be either positive or negative based on these two scenarios. So the table 3 represents the results of the estimation of equation 1. The model 2 of table 3 tests hypothesis 1, and that is whether the coefficient on the proportion of fair value assets to total assets differs from 0. The coefficient is positive and the statistically significant, thus rejecting the null. The result, therefore, is consistent with a scenario in which fair value measurements increased audit risk and auditors correspond while increased audit efforts reflected in higher audit fee pricing. The right column tests the rightmost result column tests hypothesis 2. Untabulated F test reject the null hypothesis that the 3 variables have equal coefficients. And furthermore, the results show that both the coefficient and the associated t statistics increase as inputs used for fair value measurement become less reliable. The coefficient of fair value 1, 2, and 3 are 0.5, 0.51, and 7.48 respectively, whereas the coefficient on the fair value 1 and fair value 2 are not distinguishable from each other using an untabulated F test, and the coefficient on fair value 3 is greater than either of the other two. Overall, the results in the second and third set of results column provide evidence consistent with the hypothesis 2. In the table 3, present the result of the estimation of a change model derived from equation 1 to overcome the correlated omitted variable problem, and the result from the change analysis is consistent in supporting hypothesis 1, but is weaker in supporting hypothesis 2. So we look at the table 5, which provides test of hypothesis 3. The variables of interest is ISPC, which is proxy for auditor specialization in bank industry clients. The ISPC1 captures the importance of bank industry clients relative to the audit firm's overall client base. Under this definition, several non-big N firms qualify as bank industry specialists, while ISPC2 is coded as 1 if the bank employs a big N auditor that is both a city level and national level bank industry specialist based on industry market share. The Model 1 includes only ISPC1, the Model 2 includes only ISPC2, and the Model 3 includes both. The coefficient on ISPC1 in both Model 1 and 3 are negative and significant. This is consistent with the shared auditing efficiency scenario. In contrast, the coefficient on ISPC2 in Model 2 and 3 are positive and significant, consistent with the big N banks specialists charge fee premiums. So are these two contradictory? The answer is no, because big N auditors are not bank industry specialists when specialization is measured by ISPC1. Note that all the equation 2 models in Table 5 include a separate variable that is big N. So ISPC2 does not proxy for the auditor's big N status. The results in Table 5 suggests that non-big N auditors that are bank specialists, based on the portfolio measure of expertise, achieve cost savings that are at least partially passed on to their bank clients as lower fees. However, big N auditors that are both office level and national level bank industry specialists based on bank industry market share are able to command premium fees even beyond the fee premiums charged by non-specialist big N auditors. The results suggest that industry's market-leading big N auditors are able to capture fee premiums. Then we look at Table 6, which provides tests of Hypothesis 4. In Panel A, we explore whether the bank industry specialist auditors charge more or less auditing fair value assets using ISPC1. The Model 1 test Hypothesis 4 using the fair value assets proportion as a whole, while the Model 2 test using disaggregated fair value asset proportions. The values of interest in Model 1 is the interaction term. The estimated coefficient is positive and significant, which means although industry specialists measured as ISPC1 charged their bank clients lower total audit fees, those fees are increasing in proportions of fair value assets. In Model 2, the variables of interest are also the interaction terms. The coefficient on the second interaction term is positive and significant. The other two are not significant. This suggests that ISPC1 bank industry specialist auditors charge more for auditing larger portions of Level 2 fair value assets. This might be because the Level 2 assets constitute the overwhelming type of fair value assets held by the sample banks. Then we look at the Panel B, which represents test of Hypothesis 4 using ISPC2. The Model 1 shows that ISPC2 loses its explanatory power as a standalone variable when it also is interacted with the fair value asset, and the interaction term is the interaction terms coefficient also is insignificant. The Model 2 result columns are similar. The Panel B suggests that result therefore fail to reject the hypothesis for now when auditor industry specialists are defined as per ISPC 2. Overall, the Table 5 and Table 6 results suggest that given that ISPC 1 bank specialist auditors charge a lower fee to bank clients on average, they charge more for auditing higher portions of less verifiable fair value assets, in particular level 2 assets. We could speculate that ISPC 1 bank specialists devote more effort to auditing less verifiable fair value assets and achieve the cost saving in other aspects of audit to offset these incremental costs. The ISPC 2 bank specialist auditors charge higher fees to bank clients on average, but the data do not suggest that they charge more or less for auditing higher portions of less verifiable fair value assets. The latter result could be due to a low power in the test portion that banks audited by ISPC2 specialist auditors is only 4%. So although the ISPC2 has explanatory power as a standalone variable in Table 5, its explanatory power appears to diluted when it is both used as a standalone variable and interacted with the fair value proportions. So in summary, the proportion of fair value assets held by banks are positively associated with audit fees. This relation is more evident for the least verifiable, which is the level 3 fair value assets. Bank specialist auditors defined in Bank et al. Charge lower audit fee on average, but that their audit fees increase with the portion of assets that are fair values, especially those based on level 2 inputs. Bank specialist auditors defined in Francis et al. Charge higher fees to bank clients on average, but the data do not suggest that they charge more or less for auditing higher portions of less verifiable fair value assets. And finally, there are several points to be mentioned. First, I think that the most learning, there is a need to notice that routinely exclude the financial companies. And the second is that despite the lower power of the test in the end, the result provides some exploratory evidence of the effect of auditor expertise on the relation between audit fees and fair value measured assets. And third is that is there a more appropriate auditor expertise measure for use in the banking industry? If we can find one, then we could provide better evidence for whether auditors who are bank industry specialists charge more or less than auditors to audit banks, and in particular to audit fair value bank assets. And then finally, could a careful discussion of the causal relationship be a future research topic? Now we could only say that there is a relation between the fair value assets and audit fee. However, the firms with higher portions of level 3 might also be the ones that are more likely to manipulate earnings. So thus, this will attenuate the effectiveness of the idea that greater difficulty in the auditing fair values by devoting greater resources to audit results in higher observed audit fees. That's all.
So guys, any comments?
Because nowadays because like we took our accounting information system survey and we learned something like effect size. So wonder if you look at the results of table 3, there's no improvement in R square. So can you say that this results is statistically significant, but can you say that it's having some impact? I'm not sure if I understood the effect size right, but um if you look at the table 3, the R square is 0.91. So that like although you add more variables such as like FBA, so level 1 and level 1 to 3, or just any like fair value measure, so the R square doesn't improve from the original model. So I'm not sure if this is like has a great impact or yeah.
What do you think, Chan? What do you think, Chan?
I didn't quite get the question actually. Yeah, do you
I think
mean
Jumi
that
said
why it's so the R
Jumi
square is
said that
so
there is not a lot of impact shown in table 3. Correct, Jumi?
So if you look at the
not of
table 3,
impact?
I mean the coefficient says that it's significant, but that's statistically significant. But if you look at the R square, it doesn't improve as you add in more variables. So I wonder if actually, I mean, this is significantly different, but does it really have the impact on the audit fees? Yeah,
Jumi,
yeah.
maybe I can help answer this question. So R square reported in this table is adjusted R square, which take into consideration the number of variables you include. So if you want to look at the impact that you mentioned is actually the economical impacts, right? So in that case, we actually look at the coefficient and see whether the change in the coefficient is considered as substantial or economically valuable in change. So in this case, you focus more on the statistical significance as well as the coefficient. So actually here the R square is already pretty high. But nowadays people actually, you focus on R square when you want to see whether the variables you include can explain like a lot of the changes in the dependent variable. And it depending on the situation, you may or may not focus on the R square. And I think that in this situation, they can just look at the coefficient and statistical significance to make the conclusion. So that's why the R square is not the key where you draw the conclusion from.